Well, we are in week 3 of our series we've been calling What Would Jesus Undo, which is a little bit different than maybe my generation grew up on the wristbands of what would Jesus do, and we kind of talked about that the first week. And so we're kind of working through what would Jesus undo if there's anything within our life, not his plans and not anything like that. We're talking about what would he undo within us? What grieves the heart of God? What breaks the heart of God when he looks upon our life, when he looks even upon the church and the way we do things, when he looks upon how we raise our families and how we interact? What would he undo within our lives? And so today we're going to talk about hypocrisy, and I thought we'd kind of start out on a lighter note. So let me kind of read these. During one of his political campaigns, a delegation called on Theodore Roosevelt at his home in Oyster Bay, Long Island. The president met with them with his coat off and his sleeves rolled up. You know what's coming, right? Gentlemen, he said, come down to the barn and we will talk while I do some work. At the barn, Roosevelt picked up a pitchfork and looked around for the hay. And then he called out for John. John, where's all the hay? Sorry, sir, John called down from the hayloft. I haven't had time to toss it back down after you pitched it up while the Iowa folks were here. We know politics, right? Politicians are always trying to pretend like they're doing stuff that we know they're really not. And then there was a rather pompous-looking deacon was endeavoring to impress upon a class of boys the importance of living the Christian life. Why do people call me a Christian? The man asked. After a moment's pause, one youngster said, maybe it's because they don't know you. I don't know about you, but if we're talking about being a Christian and somebody is wondering who you are and they know you, so they don't really know if they can talk about your Christian faith and how good you are and how great you are. The unfortunate truth is there's so many hypocrites around, right? Can we just admit there's a lot of hypocrites around? I don't know if anybody wants to confess. Are we getting too personal? Yeah. Here's what Brennan Manning said, this great theologian. He said, the single greatest cause of atheism in the world today is Christians who acknowledge Jesus with their lips and then they walk out the door and deny him with their lifestyle. That is what an unbelieving world simply finds unbelievable. Hypocrisy is one of those things, one of those issues that it's very easy to see in someone else. It's easy to point that out. It's easy to recognize it in someone else. But it's very difficult to see within ourselves. And we've all heard this excuse, and we'll just call it what it is, this excuse. We invite someone to come to church with us. What's one of those main, kind of comebacks we get? I don't want to go to church with all those what? Hypocrites. And we've joked about it, right? It doesn't keep you from shopping with them at Walmart, but it keeps you from worshiping with them for some reason at church. And why is that? Why do we make light sometimes of that word hypocrite? If when we get into the scripture today and we get into one at least of the 7 woes that Jesus, just hammered upon, not just the church leaders, but just the way they were doing things in general at the temple and the synagogue and how they were running religion in that time. So if it's such a big deal and it disheartens God's heart and it breaks him and it grieves him, then we as a church must be real careful about making light of what a hypocrite is and just kind of laughing it off as if it's not a big deal. I believe there's so many people that are outside these walls that may not come to church anytime soon. And they have a legitimate excuse. Now, mind you, it's an excuse. It's still their choice, right? But they have watched someone within the church that they admired. Maybe they held a position. Maybe it was even a pastor, minister, staff member, whatever. And they held them in a high regard. They respected them. They admired them. And they assumed that there was nothing wrong. But then all of a sudden, something, whether it was a big deal that happened, there was abuse, or just some big stuff, right? Even though God doesn't measure it that way. But it was something legitimate. And you pointed to it, man, that guy needs to go, that gal needs to go, and that was a big deal. But what I'm talking about are they saw them doing things out in the community. They saw them or they heard them saying things, and they realized that they weren't the person they professed to be. I remember for me, the first time it was, I had a football coach that, man, he was in the community. I think he was actually the man of the year one year. He was very well respected, and I loved him dearly. Went to my church. He was involved, taught Sunday school, all this. And then all of a sudden it came football season, right? You know where I'm going with this? And it was like, all of a sudden he starts throwing out all these words, and he starts throwing all these analogies, and then he starts pulling guys aside and telling these jokes, and you're just like, who are you? And I'm not getting super legalistic. I'm just saying what he was professing to be and who he was, it was a completely different person. Why? What was he trying to do there and there? What he was trying to do at church is he was trying to impress, and he was trying to be that person. I really feel like that's who he wanted to be at church. That was the guy. But out there among us, you can use the excuse he was trying to connect with the young men. He was trying to be where we were. But isn't there a problem in that? In order to lead, you don't get down, you relate. But you got to say, this is where we're going. There's a better way. Hypocrisy, you have your own story. You have your own thing that you bring to the table and say, yeah, this happened to me, and this, this person or this church, and there's some legitimate reasons why you're not as committed. There's legitimate reasons why maybe it took you so long to come to church, or maybe there's it's so much reason that you have somebody that you love dearly won't come to church with you. So the truth is, hypocrisy affects us, and it's affected all of us. So let's define hypocrisy. You may find it strange. Some of you, it's going to be really interesting how you handle today, because you open up the bulletin, you say there's no fill in the blanks, and so somebody's going to be driven crazy. What that either means is this is going to be a really long message, okay? Or some of you OCD people, you're just not going to make it through, okay? And so the idea today is just for you to kind of just work through. If you want to write something down, you can, but for today, I hope you're not disappointed too much. There's not a fill in the blank. So it's right there for you. Hypocrisy is portraying to others that you're someone you're not. It's someone that's being two-faced. It's someone that say, I'm trying to do this. I want people to think that I'm this, but I'm really this. Titus 1:16 says, they claim to know God, but by their actions they deny Him. So they were giving to be seen. If there was an offering plate to go around, they'd be like, hey, I just want you to know I'm giving this. And they would just, tell people, you may not know this, but I gave this. And so it's just giving and serving to be praised. They want to make sure if they're serving, if they're doing it in public or they're doing it in private, somebody's going to have to know, okay, I'm serving for this. They're fasting to be recognized and to be noticed. If they're going to fast, even if it's a day, they're going to make sure people know, man, I'm starving. And then why? Because, man, I've been fasting for the Lord. And Jesus spoke to all that. He says, hey, if you're going to do something for me, do it in private, because the rewards you receive here, which includes our praise and our admiration and all of that, that's what you get. So not that it's not about all the rewards, but I'd rather God praise me for what I did for Him rather than the world just build me up, because ultimately that doesn't praise and glorify Him anyway. Hypocrite. The Greek word for this is hypokrites, and I practiced this all week, so I hope that's right. It means an actor, a stage player, one who hides behind a mask. And so in the days where the Greeks were ruling and they had all these plays, and they would wear these masks to portray whatever character they were trying to play. And so they're trying to play a guy's playing this, and maybe many times they were playing many different characters and many different roles. They didn't have some of the stuff that we do nowadays, so they would wear that mask to portray. And so it may be 3 different characters that one person's playing, and so that's where they pull this name from. So it got me thinking, what about some masks that we may be wearing today? What does that look like? How does hypocrisy look today? So I thought about maybe a judgmental mask. If you put that judgmental mask, you know who I'm talking about. You know these people who are constantly condemning everyone of what they do based on not biblical standards, but based on their standards, their interpretations. And so they're constantly looking at us and going, you shouldn't raise your children that way because I wouldn't raise my children that way. You should serve this way. You shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that. The problem with being judgmental and wearing that mask, the reality is many times that they're constantly telling you what you shouldn't do, and the church was great at this for many, many years, is they were great at telling you what you shouldn't do and casting this judgment and setting these rules and setting these standards. But the problem is you begin to examine it, at least from the heart of God, is that person probably hasn't witnessed anyone in years, but they're following all the rules. They're not doing anything wrong. But as far as going out and ministering and going out and doing what the church is supposed to do, what we as believers are supposed to do, they've got this high and mighty view of themselves. And they want you to think that they've got everything together. And they want to point out all the flaws in your life and try to hide all the flaws within their own. And they have the judgmental mask, and then we maybe call this the happy mask. Maybe you know what I'm talking about. This is that person that when you greet them, it's always upbeat and it almost seems fake. It's always, hey, brother, it's, hey, sister, how you doing today? And you ask them how they're doing. So, I've never been so happy. I'm happy I had good sense. And you have all these lines that they throw out, and you're just like, you can't be that upbeat all the time. Does anybody just want to be real with me today? I'm all about being happy. There's nothing wrong with being happy. I hope that our greeters and the people around you are happy, right? And I'm not saying you should come in and somebody asks you how you doing and you just unload everything. That's not what I'm saying today. What I'm saying today is that person that's way too happy and saying that everything's perfect, they've got that mask on, knowing that on the way to church, they probably yelled at somebody coming. They were probably arguing on the way to church. They're probably in trouble about something. And then so we have this mask that we're wearing. We want to portray that everything's together, everything's great. And if you're not happy, at least that's the way they make me feel, if I'm not as happy as them, then I'm not really happy. I'm not joyful. And there's this self-centered mask. Those people that make you think that it's all about you, making you think that they're wanting to listen to you. But really, we know it's all about them. We know it's all about, I just want enough information for you. I want to be able to talk about you to others. And they're wearing that mask of a friend. They're wearing that mask of, I'm here for you. But really, I just want some juice. I just want some stories. I believe what God would have us to do is maybe just look within. Is there anything in our life, any area in our life where we've just been holding up a mask to others around us? Now, what I'm not talking about is when we come into church like this, there's so many people I greeted and I talked to you and we ask how you're doing. What's the first response? What's the practice response we give to each other when we come to church and somebody asks us how we're doing? All right, I'm good. I'm fine. Knowing very well you may not be. All right? But again, it goes back to what I'm not saying is everybody who comes in, you just sit down and say, I'm not fine. And I'll tell you, there's a time and a place for that, okay? And we'll get to that at the end, right? But so it's not that we're not good at saying, hey, I'm good. But what you can't do is you can't fake it to everybody. You can't wear that mask constantly. And that's the problem with what the church culture and what the Christian culture, if we're not careful. We understand the game. We understand what we're supposed to portray. We understand what we're supposed to look like because if we've been in church long enough, many of you have, we know the phrases. We know the words. And so if we know the phrases and we know the words and we just go through the motion and we're just kind of masquerading as Christians at church, but we're not living it out. We're not changing. There's no transformation happening within, and we're not ministering or discipling one. Would not God call us then a hypocrite? If we're just going through the motions, if we're playing a role, if we're wearing the mask all the time, and we're never living it out there, we're not being intentional with the opportunities He's given us. I just want to broaden and help us understand hypocrisy is not just about me holding a high position in the church and then just not being that person outside the church. To me, it's much broader than that. So Matthew chapter 23, Jesus begins to, if anything's called 7 woes, you know it's a big deal, right? And so let's get into one of them. 23 verses 27, 28, and then 33. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, Jesus says, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of bones of the dead and everything unclean. In the same way, on the outside you appear to people as righteous, but on the inside you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness. And then he calls them, you snakes, you brood of vipers. How will you escape being condemned to hell? I don't know about you, but he went from this all the way to hell. He's talking to church people, and he's saying, you guys are deceiving. And then I think about, why does he call them snakes? And I killed 2 snakes yesterday. They're hiding under my lawnmower. I took care of them. All right. So any snake, if you're a snake lover, we can talk later. I just think all snakes are worthy to be dead. But anyway, so he calls them snakes, and I got to think, why would he call them snakes? What's the big deal about snakes other than I don't like snakes and I can relate to that? But why would it be so detestable? He says, are you sure you're going to get to heaven? What I think he's referring to is going back to the beginning of the garden where we have a serpent that deceives Eve, right? And pretends to be something, and that's a whole other story and a whole other subject. Talk about a serpent that's talking to Eve and she's talking back without freaking out, okay? That's a whole other thing. But talking and trying to portray that, hey, it's not a big deal. If you eat of that tree, you're going to gain knowledge. You're not going to lose anything. You're actually going to gain something, and God's going to be okay with that. It's not a big deal. And then we find what happens then when they take the bite, right? Eve and then Adam. They take the bite, and what happens? They recognize, all this time they've been naked and nobody knew, and then all of a sudden they realize, and they're hiding in the bushes, and so they became aware of their sin. And so when he calls them snakes, what he's saying is, you're portraying to all these people that you're somebody. And you have the opportunity to minister to them, to encourage them and speak truth to them. But in fact, you're denying who God wants them to be. You're setting them up for failure. You're always condemning them. You're always telling them it's okay when it's really not. Sometimes I think we can be deceitful in how we live our life, and I think what they were doing is they were giving the illusion of public virtue when they were dealing with their own private vices. The Pharisees is who he was talking to. You're portraying to the world that everything's good in your life. But actually behind the scenes, we know Jesus. If you read through the Gospels, we know of many times he was calling out these private things that they were doing and they were dealing with because it was all about them and it was self-focused. He didn't say, woe to those who are struggling yet seeking help. You see, he wasn't dealing with the people who were not okay. He wasn't dealing with people who were struggling and taking ownership of it. He wasn't woeing the people who were struggling with addiction and were struggling with hurts and struggling with bitterness. He wasn't saying, woe to you, but yet you're seeking help. I mean, you're trying to work through this. You're trying to overcome your addiction. You're trying to overcome your bitterness. You're trying to deal face on with not be able to forgive that person. He was saying, I'm woeing to the ones who are pretending you've got it all together, but really you don't. So how's this lived out with us today? I got to think, again, to kind of think about social media. Again, not all of you are on social media, but if you are, you know what I'm talking about. How is hypocrisy sometimes, if we're not careful, how is this played out? Maybe it's a picture of a happy couple. It's a selfie, just the right angle, just the right filter. They look like they're happy. They look like everything's going great. But in reality, behind the scenes, what's happening? They're duking it out and they're trying to make it work. But if you just looked at the highlight reel, what would you think? Man, that's the greatest couple ever. What about a picture of coffee and then an open Bible on the porch? That's preachers. I've got some preacher friends on Instagram. It's like you can't have a devotion with God unless you have coffee on the table on the back porch with a great view. Okay, some of you are on social media, you know what I'm talking about. But the reality is they probably spent more time taking that picture with just the right angle and sipping that coffee than they did on the Bible app, right? I mean, they were 2 minutes reading that Bible plan, reading that verse, but man, it took 30 minutes to get that angle and the lighting and the filter just right. Some of you know what I'm talking about. And although maybe you're hurting and really in need of support, what begins to happen sometimes is we keep projecting to the world, look how great my life is. Look how amazing my life is. And we flood social media. We flood everything. We want people to know everything's good, when in reality, our world's falling apart. Now, I say all that, and some of you know that from the other side. You know how silly it is, but there's some of you, really, you understand because you've been there. You've been on that side, and you're trying to portray to people that everything's okay, and you're trying to believe, and you're trying to help yourself to believe we're going to be okay, everything's okay, but it's not okay. And you're not really talking to anybody about it. You're just projecting and hoping it's all going to work out. How does this look in a church? How does hypocrisy maybe look in a church? You've probably been here before. Somebody shares with you a burden, and immediately, because you are a church person and you are a Christian, you immediately say, I'll be praying for you. I'll be praying for you. Now, you can blame it on memory. You can blame it on, I got too many things going. There's too many people that said that to me. I said I'm praying for you to a lot of people today, and I can't remember who I said it to, right? We can use all the excuses, but how many times have we said, I'll pray for you, and we never did? I'm not asking any hands to be raised. I'm just saying, look at it. How many times did we say, hey, I'll partner with you in that, but we never, ever prayed? What I would say is be careful. Somebody's going to share something with us, and we say, hey, I'm going to pray. I understand there's different dynamics, but why not just stop there? And if you're not going to pray, don't say, I'm going to pray with you. I'm going to pray for you. How's that? We look the part here. I've talked to way too many Christians who tell the story. It's part of their story of coming to faith and getting involved in church. One of the hindrances in that was they were part of a family, and the parents or one of the other brought them to church. They were involved in church, and they came to church, and they behaved like they thought every Christian should behave. They looked the part. And everybody in church, if you asked them, do you know so? Oh yeah, they go to our church, and man, they're such good people. But behind the scenes, on the car ride to church and from church and all in between, all that's happening is there's bickering, there's arguing, there's this and there's that, and it's always just turmoil. And the children are going, which one's real? And if they were just allowed to be honest and just some honest space for just a moment, they would probably bring up in the dinner table, okay, I need to know who's the real family. Which one are we? Are we this that we're here? Or are we the family at church? Because I'd love to be that family. I'd prefer us to be that family. And I see the eyes, I see the faces, I see the head nods. And some of you can relate to this on that child's side where you went through and you kind of working through what's hypocrisy look like. It's not just about this person who was on TV preaching and making a lot of money and reaching a lot of people, and then all of a sudden we find out they weren't really who we thought they were. And we look at that, man, yeah, that's hypocrisy. What I'm saying is, let's bring it to real life, because what I'm just talking about here, that's real life. It may not affect as many people as some televangelists, but it affected those children. It affected the people who knew. And in the eyes of God and the heart of Jesus, don't you think his heart breaks as much for that as he does this? What about we believe that we should forgive people even if they don't ask? We see it in Scripture. We know it to be true. We believe that we should forgive. But we don't. We hold that grudge because we think it's hurting them. We think we're getting them back, when in reality, it's hurting us. They're not even thinking about it, but it's tearing you up. It's not allowing you to live free. It's not allowing you to have the peace that God wants to speak into your life. And so we hold those grudges and we hold on to that. Again, what I'm not saying, and what I don't believe that Jesus is saying, he wasn't telling them, all right, guys, every time you meet somebody, you have to air your dirty laundry. That's not what we're talking about here. That's not what he's saying. But what is he saying? I think there's hope for the hypocrite in all of us. He goes back in verses 25 and 26, right before we just read, he says, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites." He sets them up again. "You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence." So you want everybody to think it's clean on the outside, it looks great, pristine, but on the inside there's crud, right? How many of you have left dishes in the sink to let them soak? That's your system, right? I mean, right? The outside is good, and if we just put the dishes up, I mean, the outside, it looks great in the pantry. It looks great in the cabinets. It looks great, but on the inside, if you don't clean it right, what happens? It starts to smell. It gets funky. And honestly, you may be okay with it, but nobody else is okay with pulling that bowl out and seeing that. I don't know if you had Fruit Loops, or Fruity Pebbles is the worst, right? That stuff's sticky. I don't know what they put in Fruity Pebbles, but the moment milk hits it, it becomes super glue. I mean, like Gorilla Glue to the dishes. And so we just don't do Fruit Loops anymore for that reason, all right? So you've got to get it all if you're going to do that. And so all of that's in there, if you don't clean it the next time you pick up that bowl, fellow OCD, you don't have to be OCD for this to bother you, but I pick up a bowl, and it's there. It looked clean. I assumed it was clean because it was in the cabinet. But when I picked it up and tried to use it, what happens? I got to wash that thing. Or if I'm just playing dirty, I'm putting it back and I'm getting a clean one out. You know what? Some of you have done that. You have done that. Because I've done that. All right, I'll show you. It's the next one in line, baby. So that's dish hypocrisy. We'll call it that. So, we get it out. And so what he's saying is, don't appear to the world, don't appear to church, don't appear to your people like you've got it all together. Because when somebody gets close enough to you, especially if you're in a leadership position or you're a boss, it's not just in church, it's out there. Eventually what's going to happen is somebody's going to get close to you for you to react some way. Somebody's going to get close to you to get to know the real you. You can't fake it so long that at some point you're going to let it slip. Your kids are going to ask for prayer requests in the children's building, and they're going to, my mom and dad always argue, and that's when it comes out. I'm just telling you, it all comes out over there. All right, so all that's kind of happened, and somebody's going to pull that bowl out, and they're going to go, it's not as clean as I thought. That's what he's saying. He's saying it's not just about grieving the heart of God, which should be our main focus. It's also about you hinder the work of God within the church and the community. And we hinder the work of God in the church and the community. When we pretend to be someone we're not. We want others to believe that we're this. And he says, you blind Pharisee. Remember, you're choosing not to see it in yourself. You've got that mask held up in the mirror. You even believe yourself. First, clean the inside of the cup and the dish, and then the outside will be clean. Jesus hates hypocrisy. It stirs his stomach. It makes him sick. And what I find true about this, if we just look at it, he's not going to honor our worship. He's not going to honor our life. You may be thinking everything's good. Everything's coming together for me. But when it comes down to the witness and the work of God in you and through you, it's not going to go forward. We can't be fruitful when we're filled with hypocrisy. Proverbs 28:13. As we wrap this up, he says, whoever conceals their sins does not prosper, but the one who confesses and renounces them finds mercy. So what does that mean to us? Again, I'm going to reiterate this. Don't leave here and say, well, instead of me saying I'm good, I'm fine when I come to church every time, I'm supposed to say, well, we had a fight on the way here, preacher. There's a time. Just tell me, I'm not okay. When do you have time this week? All right, I'm good with that. We can work through it. What I'm saying in all this, to someone that we trust, we have to remove the mask. Whatever mask we're holding up, that judgmental mask, that happy mask, that self-centered mask, that I'm okay, everything's okay mask, but it's really not okay mask, we've got to take it off. You've got to find somebody that you love, somebody that you trust, because here's what's happening, especially for people who are new to church or new to a specific church. They come into church, and unless they know you, what they're assuming is they come in and they go, man, everybody looks like they've got it together. Isn't that an assumption sometimes? How do we do that? Social media, we look at the highlight reel and go, man, they've got a great life. I wish I had a boat. And then you get a boat, at least I have some friends with a boat, and you're like, it's a lot, I don't know if you want a boat. They're good. Boat's good, that's good. Somebody got a new car. Man, I want a new car. Well, that car's not that old, right? And you got oh man, I need to lose some weight. Look at that. Look at so-and-so, right? Look at, man, they've lost size. They look so good, and I look so bad. And so you just compare, and you're always going, look at what they're doing. And I'm not saying it's not real. I'm not speaking out against that. I'm saying don't judge your real life to someone else's Facebook life. Don't do it. It may be their real life, and that's great. But what I'm saying is, don't even fall into believing the hypocrisy of assuming that everybody has it figured out. Because I'm here to tell you, I don't have it figured out. You see, I still have to have conversations with my wife and my daughter about, all right, balance. Because if Amy just turned me loose, man, all my energy be into this. I mean, I love this. I love church. I go see all the games, go see do everything. It'd be about building this. But the reality is, as Billy Sunday said, I won the whole world, but I lost my family. And guys, the best witness I can be as your pastor is to have a family that will testify that Brian is the same guy there as he is up here. I want the respect and the honor of those who know me best. And there's been times where I've wrestled with that, where I give my everything to this. And this isn't I'm not unloading, I'm not trying to throw a pity party. I'm just saying there's been times where I've gone all in this, and I've come home and I've just dropped off my leftovers. I've given all my energy here, and I get home and it's like, I've got nothing else to give. Is that honor God? No. Is that honor the church? No, because eventually that catches up. Hypocrisy isn't just about someone who's really high and they've done something really big and they have this big fall. Hypocrisy is also about if there's anything I'm faking, anything I'm pretending to be that I'm not. So what do we do with this? What do we do? How do we keep from falling into hypocrisy in our life? And here it is. I believe this is a prayer that we should pray routinely and privately. Psalm 139, verses 23 and 24. Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there's any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Will you bow your heads with me? You see, I believe that only the Holy Spirit can search our hearts, can know what's within us, what's going on that nobody else knows about. You know, but maybe there's a blind spot in your life. You've been holding on to that mask so long that you're blind to it. And so I encourage you not just to go to God and pray this prayer and ask Him to search you in your private, personal time with Him. Just, God, is there anything? But also go to those people that you trust. Go to somebody and say, man, is there something about me that I'm not living it out, but I seem fake. Help me to work through that. As you're allowing the Holy Spirit to minister to you right now, I just encourage us to open up and say, God, is there something within me? Is there anything that's just inconsistent? It's not matching up. I want to be real. I want to be genuine. I want to be authentic. But also, maybe you're dealing with some sin. You're dealing with something that's been holding on to you for a while, and you going to church just isn't fixing it. And I'll just say going to church isn't going to fix it alone. You have to be intentional. You have to seek accountability. You have to confess it to Him.